Welcome to my podcast, Magic Brain Kicks. And this is a very green episode because it's all about trees and planting trees, especially in Europe. I invited a startup. It's called EcoTree, which is based in Copenhagen and also in France, and now has a country developer in Germany. And I welcome the CEO, Thomas Canguilhem, and he is now in Copenhagen. So I say hello to Thomas in Copenhagen. I drive over, and I want to ask you at first, of course, what is the background to start EcoTree? What was your motivation to do that?
Hi, hello, Maria, and absolutely thrilled to be here. Thank you for having me. Well, it started actually. I'm 45 now. My personal background has always been 100% entrepreneurial, and in a way, EcoTree is sort of my third business venture. But I think with this one, I have really succeeded in combining, well, obviously my passion for entrepreneurship, as well as my love for nature and my ambition to help fighting climate change. So I'm not on my own. I started with five co-founders, who started the business back in 2016 in France. And it all really started with, as quite often, with the frustration, which was that, as no one obviously hates nature, we still keep destroying it at an alarming rate. Mm-hmm. So our view on that is like, how is such a nonsense actually possible? And we realized that it is because there is a business model for nature to disappear. Not that we're looking for it, obviously, but this model that we have obviously developed around us in 2023 over the last couple of decades and centuries, in a way has enabled or has allowed nature to be destroyed, right? As a sort of collateral damage, as something that in a way comes with no cost. And so the only way we saw to come over that frustration and sort of stop that nonsense basically was to instead literally completely reverse the table and say, well, we need to find a way for nature to be restored, to be preserved. And we need to find a way for nature to be valued. So with this in mind, we have, we got actually inspired by the Scandinavian and German recycling system for used cans and bottles. It's called Pfand system in Germany, right? Because it's a fantastic way to actually monetize the act of recycling. And we decided in a way to use that, well, proven good old method of financial incentive and adapt that to tree planting and sustainable forestry. Mm-hmm. So we have literally created a business model that enables individuals and companies, because we really want everyone on board, to support and invest actually in nature. So that's kind of how it started. And from there, we've built this quite still unique and a very original model of tree ownership, where anyone, literally, again, any individual, any organization, company, can buy online newly planted trees from our forest in France, either freshly started forest or more mature ones, like the one you can see in the background here, and become what we call the tree owner, so that you will get both the very tangible environmental benefit that trees and sustainably managed forests can offer, and I guess we'll elaborate on that throughout this discussion, but also, on top of that, so to speak, the perspective of a financial gain, or at least of a financial return. And this was really the idea in a period where there is so much awareness, climate awareness, and there's so much good intentions out there, which is fantastic, but how to turn all that into actual concrete and immediate action, that was a challenge. And using the proven method of financial incentive to turn those good intentions into concrete climate action is really at the heart of what we try to do at EcoTree.
Mm-hmm. Yes. And you started in France, and is it easy to plant trees in France, or how is it possible to find areas, private, for example, to plant the sustainable forest, of course?
Yes, in France, it's fairly similar on that aspect in Germany, but like the forest coverage is roughly 30%. It's a bit more in Germany, but in France, it's roughly 30% of the country, which is covered by forest, which is not bad for temperate regions. But 70% of it is privately owned. The thing was that among the 70% of privately owned forest land, it was really, really very much moralized. So like primarily because of the inheritance law in France, but so you end up having a lot, like over 2.5 million very small land forest owners, which in most of the cases have no expertise, no finance, and sometimes even no real interest to develop sustainable forestry. So there was a really great potential to help those land forest owners to actually, start to develop sustainable forestry. So we started taking over, fairly mismanaged forestry land, and do what needed to be done to regenerate them, boost the local ecosystem, and develop the healthy, long-lasting forestry ecosystem. That's how we initially started, and from there we've then taken over bare land, agriculture land, where we literally from scratch start new forestry projects.
Mm-hmm. And in respect of biodiversity, you plant, of course, the original trees normally are there or growing there. And perhaps auch in respect to climate change, some other species, or what is the approach, long-term approach in this areas?
Well, maybe really to put things back in context, it is true that trees and forests are our best allies to tackle the two major environmental challenges that humanity is facing, climate change and the biodiversity collapse, right? I think both are in a way the two sides of the same coin, and they are very much linked. But let's say that it's commonly admitted that those are the two major threats: climate change and the rise of temperature due to greenhouse gas effect, and then the possible sixth mass extinction and what's called the biodiversity collapse. And on those both challenges, forests and trees are our best allies. When it comes to greenhouse gas emissions and the climate change, forests are on Earth the second largest carbon sink, right? The first one is actually the oceans. But let's admit that forests are slightly more actionable than oceans. A bit easier to say I'm going to start a forest here than to say I'm going to start an ocean here. So even though it's only the second largest carbon sink, it is something that is actually at hand that we can actually work with. And when it comes to the biodiversity collapse, it is also commonly accepted that roughly 80% of land-living animal species actually have forest as habitat. So again, forests here have a tremendous impact when it comes to biodiversity restoration and biodiversity preservation. So again, on those two main challenges, forest and trees are our best allies. This being said, you have forestry means a lot of things, and what we believe is the right approach is somewhere in between the classic, distinction between, on the one hand, like untouched nature, untouched forest, and then one pictures like the tropical, rainforest. And on the other side, like the highly intensive monocultural sort of tree farm, tree plantation, right? With this implied idea that the one is very good and the one is also in opposite very bad. We believe there's somehow in between a good compromise to find. And this is what we try to implement at EcoTree, in the sense that, and we call that, or it is called close to nature, sustainable forestry. So this means on the one hand that where we try to be as close to nature as possible. And that means a few principles I'd be happy to elaborate, but typically mixing species is a way nature would do instead of monocultural, doing what's called uneven age forest, where you have throughout the life of the forest, you do some thinnings, some assisted regeneration, artificial regeneration, natural regeneration. So you end up having an uneven aged forest with young trees, mature trees, and everything in between, right? Of course, using no chemicals and no pesticides. All those practices and using local spaces as well, so that you don't just copy paste forestry plans from one location to the other. All this is trying to be as good and as close to nature, what Mother Nature would do, But on the other hand, we allow ourselves to have some productive activity slightly and responsibly implemented, in the sense that we never do clear cuts, because that has obviously a dramatic impact. But we do what's called selective cuts, or it's called thinnings, where we will typically every 15 years harvest 10, 12% of a designated area. And so that's definitely a human active, productive activity on the forest. This has actually, and it's really important, has actually several benefits. The first one is that is actually what enables our financial incentive return model. Because, as I mentioned, when you're a tree owner, it's your tree. So whenever your tree reaches maturity and is harvested as part of that forestry management plan, well, we will set it for high quality timber, and we're going to hand over 100% of that revenue to you, the tree owner. It's your tree, it's your timber, it's your right to the revenue. And that's how we get this return on investment. It's obviously long-term perspective, right? Because forests like the one in my background take decades to grow. So it's a long-term perspective, but it's on average a 2% financial gain per year that you can expect, which means that throughout the life cycle of between 30 to 60, 80 years, 9 years, you're going to double or triple your initial investment. So that harvesting activity is what triggers our model of giving back some money to the tree owners and activating that proven method of financial incentive I talked about earlier. But from a purely environmental aspect, doing those thinnings, we claim, has also quite two strong positive environmental impact. First, it actually helps accelerate, so to speak, the ecosystem's growth and development. I like to take the similarity, like with a good morning scrub in the shower, where remove the dead cells on your skin and help having a healthy, actively regenerated skin. Similarly, doing those thinnings, where you remove some more mature trees, you give more light and more access to light and space to younger trees, who will then grow more quickly or actively, and it helps again boosting an ecosystem. Not that nature necessarily needs that, but more because we need nature to go a bit quicker, to do more carbon sequestration and to quicker restore or preserve biodiversity. So it has a sort of a boost effect on the forestry ecosystem. And the second effect is called the substitution effect. It means that, well, whenever you produce timber is a fantastic commodity that humanity has been using since the very beginning. But which now has been replaced by other more polluting commodities. So every time you actually use timber rather than a more climate heavy commodity such as plastic, cement, or steel, well, you're actually having a positive impact as well on the environment. Just to give you an example, whenever you use 1 cubic meter of timber instead of plastic, you're saving 2 tons of CO2 emissions. And it goes up to 4 tons of saved CO2 emissions if you use 1 cubic meter of timber instead of cement or steel. So 4 tons, that's quite significant for those who are not familiar with what is 2 tons of CO2. An average European citizen has a yearly footprint on average of 8 to 12, you could say roughly, tons per year. So, saving 2 or saving 4 tons of CO2 emissions by using timber rather than plastic and cement or steel has quite a tremendous impact. So the substitution effect is actually something that is positive. And as much as people often say, oh, you cut trees, that's bad. Well, not necessarily. Again, if you do it responsibly and if you do it selectively and carefully, it can help, again, not necessarily Mother Nature herself. She doesn't need that, but nature helps us back, if you see what I mean.
Yes. Yes, that sounds really cool. And of course, we have a relationship to trees, especially to forests. And therefore, to be a forest owner or a tree owner is a very cool relationship. And of course, with these benefits you explained, could be a long-lasting investment. And of course, a cool climate investment. But you are a very young company. You started, I think, 3 or 4
2016.
Okay, in France, and now you are in Denmark too, and also in Germany. Can you explain a little bit how you preserve the new planted forests? Because we now actually hear about forest fires, and of course, especially also in the Berlin area, actually we have a forest fire, and therefore it's not so easy to plant trees all over the world, but especially I would say now in Europe.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And I just, of course, want to highlight that we're talking about the natural asset, natural Mother Nature. So there are natural risks, which even with our best intention in the world and our best expertise, we can't always control. So I wouldn't certainly claim that whatever we do is going to be there for the eternity. We just try to limit or mitigate those natural risks, and I'd be happy to elaborate on that. When it comes to the development, something I'd like to mention is that we are a fully integrated forestry company. I like to joke about the fact that we are a startup that didn't start in a garage for once, but in the forest or in the woods. Yeah. And we are like above 100 teammates today, and a good 20% of us are forestry experts or forestry scientists or working directly with our forestry projects. So we design the projects, we implement them, we carry them out, we maintain them, and all that. This being said, in our model, I mentioned that you can buy a tree online in a few clicks, right? And it starts at typically 15 euros per tree. So it may sound that you are far away from the $1 per tree, €1 per tree on many donation models, which some are good. That's not what I'm saying, but what's very unique with our model and those 15 euros that you pay is that, well, you get the ownership of it. So as I mentioned earlier, you get the right to the future proceeds, the future revenue associated to the trees. But to be very transparent, roughly in those 15 euros, you've got a roughly 30-35%, which is our gross margin. That's where we as a company make actually money to develop our business and our impact. We don't make money when you get the tree from the timber. That goes 100% to our tree owners. So out of those 15%, roughly 35% is our gross margin. Then another 30% is covering, well, obviously the operational cost of planting, land acquisition, and all that. And the remaining 40%, and that is very unique, is sort of put on escrow account. It's frozen, so to speak. And it is something that is actually duly monitored by the financial authorities in the countries where we operate. I'd like to mention that. We have like public financial watchdogs looking at what we do, and that's a good thing. But those 40% basically are there to make sure that, again, there are going to be the long-term financial resources for your trees and that forest to grow. Because it's not just about planting trees in the ground. That's a good start. But I mean, we're only talking about significant environmental impact if those planted trees actually turn into a healthy and long-lasting ecosystem like the one you see in the background, right? And that implies having the long-term financial resources ready for that. Mm-hmm. And that's a really quite unique that whenever you buy a tree today, you will have at least secure the financial resources for this tree to go through his expected life cycle. And this being said, and maybe also to close my answer to your question, when it comes to those natural risks, some of them or most of them are actually insurable, right? So we insure them, not in the classic sense of that you get 100% the money back if something happens, like when you insure your car or your bike or whatever, but more in the sense that you get a fee we get a fee for replanting and restarting a project that may have been damaged. But some of those risks like fire, flooding, storm, etc., are insurable. Two major risks are not insurable, and that would be diseases and well, as you referred to, there are very, very critical and dramatic examples in Germany, in Europe, but in Germany typically these days with the bark beetle, and as well as drought, so drying out. Those two risks are not insurable, but we try to mitigate them by the type of forestry that we implement. Typically, as I mentioned, the fact that we mix species is one of the best way to actually mitigate that risk, because whenever a disease, a bacteria, an insect attacks a tree species, well, if you mix them, you limit the impact of the damages. Yeah, when you looked at in Germany, like roughly 55% of the forests are only with two tree species, two conifers, like spruce and pine. That puts the whole German forestry ecosystems quite at risk. So on the project that we aim to implement now in Germany, it is a lot about diversifying the type of tree species that should be there. Mm-hmm. And drought, similarly, we try to be very careful in the locations where we select. Obviously, when we plant in France, we don't plant in Provence. How much I personally like that region, but we don't plant there. We rather go in Bretagne or Pays de la Loire or some other areas or northern part of Europe, where obviously the risk of drought is limited, or at least is not as accurate as it is in the southern part of Europe.
Yes, but it comes to the north because especially in Berlin, some park areas, wonderful trees, old trees, 200 years old, are now facing the drought, and it's very hard to see how they suffer. No?
Yes, and which is also why one of the actions that we implement on our forest is also typically like water wetland restoration or water pond networking and all those kind of activities, because it helps again. It helped in increasing the resilience of the forestry ecosystem, because forests and trees are extremely resilient. They've shown that through the billion years of history, but they're not. Their resilience is not as quick as the pace of the climate change that we impose on them. So that's why it actually possibly in high danger, because the climate change simply goes too quick for the pace of their natural resilience. And that is a real issue, but which is really why in all the activities that we implement, it's equally important for us to optimize the carbon sequestration, because that obviously helps the tackle climate change. But it is for us equally important to address the biodiversity restoration and preservation. And a great deal of our activities are in typically restoring wetlands, installing, beehives to help pollinator populations. Again, depending case by case, but it's really a 50-50 focus for us, even though it means sometimes making compromises. So if you have like a river crossing a land, well, we won't plant just, all to the edges of that river. We leave typically 12-15 meters on each bank, on each side, so we lose, you could say, some carbon sequestration performance, but we gain obviously a lot in terms of biodiversity restoration and preservation. So this is the type of compromise that, again, our experts, knowing the field, knowing the terrain, are trying to optimize.
Yes. And of course, it includes a lot of science and a lot of, adjustments, because it's all changing now. And therefore, you have, as you said, some experts in that field, and it's including. Can you perhaps explain the new plans in Germany? What is especially going on in Germany? Because you are really fresh in Germany, when I say.
Yeah, it's true. Well, we started earlier this year, and we have we have quite a few opportunities at hand now. We used actually a lot of information from the Waldzustandsbericht from 2022, from last year, that said indeed that like 20% of the trees of the tree population is at risk because of the drought or the bark beetle, right? That 55% of the tree population is basically focused or based on only two species, right? So all those things are factors. Whenever we enter a new market, be it Germany or Denmark or some other countries, we always try to understand what's the forestry agenda, what's the challenges there, where do we start, right? Basically, and those typically were the two key factors of the German forestry assets, you could say. So we have different opportunities, like in Harz, for example, replant what has been lost. So we literally try to come after a disaster and try to replant and try to definitely have a mixed forest approach, right? With uneven age trees as a format, and trying to implement different type of tree species like oaks, cherry, Douglas, other trees. We do water pond networks, as I said, because that also has a key impact on when it comes to fighting drought. I think it's in Rhône, we also have like forest and grassland mix. So it's not just about always trees, but also how we can possibly adapt with agriculture and agroforestry models, protect soils, all those kind of challenges are what we look into. And even when we select land, for example, for the possible project we are aiming to work on, we typically would favor, instead of one area that would be sort of surrounded by fabrics or urban developments or agriculture, we would favor having the lands connected to some natural areas, so we can create networks, corridors for biodiversity typically to kind of expand its area. So all those factors is what we're trying to look at, and in Harz now, in Rhône, I think it's North Vogesen as well. So we have different areas where we really try to adapt, again, our vision, our methodology, our expertise to the local needs.
Yes. Yes, and of course, then also the communities around these new plantings are also included, and it's of course important that you work together. And for me, also it's interesting when I now buy a tree. And I'm a tree owner. How can I check my tree or the growing of my tree?
Yeah, well, first of all, you can always welcome to go and visit it and give it a hug if you feel like that.
So it is a special tree? It is marked or something like that?
No, that's a very good question. It is not marked, or you won't find like your tree if you've purchased one tree. Obviously, we use the concept of what's called fungibility, which is a very important concept. That means that your tree have a certain characteristic, like what species is it, what age is it, where is it located. It has literally GPS coordinates, and what is it's a cutting horizon, right? But you may have a 2-year-old oak tree in this location that's going to be harvested in 60 years, for example. There are maybe 200 of those trees in this designated area. So, of course, if you go there, you can, thanks to the geolocation, fairly precisely kind of identify the area. But again, it won't be standing there with your name played on it. The idea is that you have one among those. So you don't have 3 or 0. You just have one if you've purchased one, but it is sort of mitigated with similar ones there. Right. One of the benefits is that, first of all, it's because it's practically impossible to count trees in a forest. I mean, is a newly self-regenerated little sapling 30 centimeters high, is that already a tree? Yes, no, who won't? I mean, it would be a nonsense anyway. So first of all, technically seen, and also in terms of risk mitigation, as we talked earlier, this means that if you have 10 trees on an area with 5 other or whatever, X other core tree owners, well, if something happens and if a storm, for example, damages 30% of that area, you don't have then the question like, oh, mine fell down, so I lost my tree, but it helped protect you also. Oh, you lost your tree still there. That's unfair, whatever. To avoid this kind of weird situations where you all would lose possibly 30% of your tree asset, but you would co-share pro rata to your investment what's left, right? So this concept of fungibility is what helps mitigating the risk among the co-owners. But this being said, you can definitely go visit. All our forests are public. And maybe on here, a note I'd like to say is that this is also a strong driver of we want to leverage to activate with our community, is that beyond the financial incentive carrot, so to speak, the local aspect we see is also has a tremendous impact on how we can engage people. Because it's one thing to have sponsored a tree in the other part of the world where you don't even know exactly what's going on, whether traceability, all that might be questionable. There, it helps knowing that it's local, even though, I mean, on a global aspect, doesn't change whether you've planted trees here or there. I mean, it has a global impact, and that's what we all should be looking after. But this being said, humans are humans. They like, what's close. They like what is their own. And this local aspect of having something that you can identify and go visit in a way happens to be a strong driver that we leverage with this EcoTree model. So all of ours are open. You're always welcome to go visit and check by yourself. how they're doing.
Yes, I also think it's a very good driver to be sustainable, because it's something you love. You love to go to this forest you helped to grow or to plant, and that's a very interesting factor, of course.
Yeah, and see the progress of it. I think that's the best. The best way to make it concrete and tangible. And beyond that, we've built a sort of a digital universe, right, around this concept of true ownership to make it as tangible and as exciting as possible. Where so on your personal account on our website ecotree.green, you can indeed localize your trees, follow their growth, and well, it's not like, let's be honest, it's not like something new is happening every day, right? So it's not a TikTok feed. You can't find about your trees.
No. Yeah.
Mother Nature does a good work, but it takes time. But this being said, we're trying still to develop tech and digital tech in particular to try it again to make that exciting. So we have made a what we call a forest view, which is like Street View on Google Map. I think everyone's familiar with that, where we've mimicked on one project that feature where you basically with your phone you look at it and you can like look at the forest around you, and then you double click and you jump 20 meters ahead, and here's an oak tree. You click, you get a little pop-up with some information about that tree. So we're trying to use this type to leverage this type of digital features to make it again more fun, more interactive, and more as exciting as possible.
Yes, of course, it's important in these days to have fun and to click in this forest and to show everyone this is my part of my forest and about this tree, and this one of this kind of tree. And on the other hand, it's wonderful to be inside in person and to smell and look all around those trees. That's another factor. Yeah, of course. Yes, and you are I think one of the first ones to do forestation in Europe for this whole concept. And it's important for me, I think, to do it in Europe, because normally we have all these CO2 certification projects in Africa, in Asia, in South America or something like that. And it's what do you think? What is the role of Europe? Is it a pioneering role, or what is the responsibility, especially of the industrialized countries? Because normally we say, okay, then we help the developing countries and plant something there, but it's far away and not directly an impact in the front door. And therefore, I think near all these frameworks we have, the European Green Deal and everything, but you have to realize it here in Europe too. Or what do you think? What is your opinion on that?
Yeah, no, I think you're absolutely right. And the whole do as I say, not as I do, sometimes mindset that we have in Europe or in developed countries has to change, especially when it comes to environmental change or crisis, because I mean, there's been a very, look at deforestation. We are very good at, obviously, and for very good reasons, to fight deforestation in, for example, of the rainforest on the tropical belt. We just sometimes tend to forget that we have ourselves in Europe been deforesting massively. A country like Denmark is one of the reasons why it was our first move beyond our French domestic market. It's because Denmark has 15% forest coverage. It's one of the lowest within the temperate regions. And it went even down in the beginning of 1805, 1810 or something. So 200 years ago, it went even down to 5% forest coverage because it has been massively deforested. So sometimes we tend to forget that. And I think it's a good reminder to keep that we do have a responsibility for sure. There was in 2020, there was for me, mind blowing statistic coming from the Oxfam, organization that it's literally like a sort of a mirror effect. Like the 10% of most wealthiest countries in the world are accountable for 50% of the greenhouse gas emissions. And the opposite, the poorest, you could say 15% of the countries are only accountable for 10% of the emissions. Yes. So we do have a massive, let's be honest about it, a massive responsibility. And we're not even the first ones to suffer from the dramatic consequences of climate change. In that same Oxfam report, if you look at the list of 10 countries that will first suffer from climate change, you find Bangladesh, you find South Sudan, Sierra Leone, Haiti, those countries who are among the poorest and the most struggling ones. They're not even responsible for that current situation, and that they will be, and they are already the first one to suffer. So yeah, if that's not responsibility, then I don't know what it is. So I don't want to, it's not a question of self-inflicting pain or bad conscience, but let's just be honest and let's take action now. That's my point. And massively at scale. We need to take action now and at scale.
Yes, I agree totally. And how do you have connections to the Scandinavian countries like Sweden or Norway and Finland, because they have a long tradition in forest management? The whole paper industry or other timber industry is located in this area.
Yes, and there is there's a different forestry agenda. You could say they have if you look at the northern part of Sweden or Norway or Finland, which is called the boreal or subboreal forests.
Yes.
Right? You have, I mentioned the temperate forest, like the ones in Germany, in France, or even Denmark. You have the tropical belt, very well known, is 50% of the forest worldwide. And then you have roughly accounting for 2020 or between 25 and 30, I think, % of the worldwide forest is the boreal forest. So they have another type of challenge, which is that they are, for some industrial reasons, you mentioned paper heating industry and all that, but also for natural reasons, because, the conditions there do not allow any tree species to grow. So they are very monocultural. So there's a very high forest coverage, but here again, there is a biodiversity challenge, because for the reasons we talked about Germany, that sort of heat line growing north and north year after year, decades after decades, they may very well, and they already start in some areas, to be inadapted to the new local climatic conditions. And being very monocultural, that puts them at risk. They can, in a very short period of time, have a dramatic impact on those. So here again, it's not there's a special forestry agenda for that region. And again, we really try to adapt to that and have as local and targeted impact as possible with our operations.
Yes, it's an important factor because the boreal forest is not just the northern part, but also some areas in Germany are boreal forests, because often I would introduce, you Germans have these fairy tale forest management because we love forests and we have this very close relationship, and it's a little bit different. It's a cultural thing, I would say, in Finland or Sweden or also when it comes to Canada, they also have this large forestry really huge cutting areas. And but what is it? What you see for the future? Yes, we think this end of the Green Deal, this 2030 age. What do you want to do with EcoTree? Because you say, may the forest be with you. Yes, we are both wearing green today for the forest. Indeed. And what is your, how do you see the future for EcoTree, or what are your goals up until 2030?
Well, we certainly want to have as much impact as possible, right? And that means onboarding as many people and organizations as possible, and have basically a positive impact on various ecosystems. That's really our compass. Whatever is having a positive impact on people or on natural ecosystems, we feel it's a field for us. So this being said, we have from this, core historical expertise of tree planting and forestry, we've broadened up our scope of activities to what's called a nature-based solution. Because again, as much as there's a strong focus these days, at least for companies, on carbon credits and carbon sequestration and carbon sink, we, from the very beginning, and we still believe that we need to go beyond that, right? And as I said earlier, address to a similarly important level, like the restoration and biodiversity preservation. So, and then forests are a good playground for that, so to speak, but you can also have the marine environment, but you have wetland, peatlands. So we have broadened up our scope of activities to what's called, generally speaking, nature-based solution. And we want to be, at least in Europe, the biggest player in the next couple of days, and then spread further down geographically in as many markets and countries and regions as possible. Really, again, with this compass or focus of having positive impact on natural ecosystems. And that maybe James helps me to jump back on my initial, when I explained how the vision, how it all started. We want to be able to turn this whole punitive ecology, this punitive mindset on, scaring people all the time, or finger pointing, and taxing those who are not environmental friendly. We believe if we want to engage everyone, we're going to need to have a more positive approach, right? And using the financial incentive is one of them. Using the local aspect is one of them. We need to see the half glass as the glass half full and not half empty. Otherwise, just our arms will kind of fold and we're not going to do anything. Whether you want to run the marathon or climb the Everest, and I think when we're looking at environmental challenges, this is what we have ahead of us. You don't start with the Everest itself or the marathon itself. You go small steps, step by step. You start running 1 kilometer, you start a smaller summit, etc. If you see my picture here, we need to start with small steps, baby steps in a way. That's always better than doing nothing. And that's how we're going to ultimately reach the ambition that we should all have. And we at EcoTree want to be part of that. We want to be a leading organization, clearly in Europe in the next couple of years in this field of using nature, helping nature to restore ourselves.
Yes, wow, that's a great goal. And you say the trees for everyone and also for companies. How is it possible? You say online per click. We can or I can buy a tree, and is it the same for companies? They will perhaps click and buy 100 trees or something like that.
We have two ways to engage, basically. More depending if you're maybe a rather small company, or if you kind of know what you want, you can definitely go on ecotree.green, our website. Look, we have a corporate section where you can even online buy some trees, or we even have a subscription system where with the credit card you decide on how many trees you want to invest on a monthly basis, and off you go. You build your little forest month after month. So that is clearly a very do-it-yourself, easy way to engage online in no time and at any time. For more advanced or more scaled needs, we have a team of experts on all the markets where we operate. So it's the UK, it's Germany, it's France, it's the Nordic regions, it's Benelux, definitely. We'd be happy to understand your needs and support you in your journey. What is important for companies is also, and that's an occasion to touch the greenwashing topic, which is always in the back. And in a way, it scares so much companies that for good reasons, they don't want to be accused of greenwashing, because greenwashing is it doesn't lead anywhere. And we certainly don't want to encourage companies to go business as usual and then just plant a couple of trees with us. All right. As much as we want to plant trees, if a company is just, running business as usual, that ultimately is not going to help. And that would be a valid greenwashing accusation opportunity. And we don't want that for them. And we certainly don't want to be associated to that. So we always encourage them to think holistically, think globally, and typically start thinking about how they can reduce their impact, whether it's plastic pollution, whether it's obviously CO2 greenhouse gas emissions. And then, or in parallel, then engage with us and see whether they want to offer trees to the employees instead of, for Christmas, or for the new teammates joining the company, instead of a box of chocolate or flowers that are going to die in 3 days and are have likely flow throughout Europe. In terms of footprint, you can do better than that. So why not offering corporate gift as a tree as a corporate gift is a good way to engage, or to buy carbon credits. We do as well, use and deliver really high quality, high integrity carbon removal credits, European based. That's a good way still to a very tangible way to obviously demonstrate an impact. Or we can also help companies, basically associate trees to different consumer behavior. So if you want, you can, for example, an example we see often is a company that wants her supplier or her customers to go paperless. So, you stop sending letters for invoices and stuff like that, and you go digitally. Well, you can reward them for accepting to go paperless with you by giving them tree or by planting trees. So using sort of the engagement power of trees as a customer engagement, as a customer loyalty, that also is very impactful and very, very useful. And we have lots of expertise and experience in this field. So then definitely our team can help understand your needs, understand where you are in your sustainability journey, and clearly support you in again, as I said, having an immediate and concrete impact. Because, there's a lot of discussion. You mentioned it, like the CSRD, the Science-Based Target Initiative, all those big frameworks. And honestly, I think they are vital, and I'm glad as a European citizen that in a way Europe is showing the way for this with this kind of high integrity, high quality labels, frameworks, regulated markets and all that. And as much as that is needed for a large corporation and organization, you also need the warm storytelling, the maybe less impactful if you look at the big picture, but more local, more immediate, more fast implemented impact. And that's what trees and tree gifts and stuff like that can actually. So it's in a way for organizations a balancing act between both, I would say.
Yes, thank you so much. And I agree totally. It's the direct impact. It must be local. It must be a little bit to be seen, and it must be emotional, so that you build a relationship to your going and to your future impact. And that's very important. And therefore, good success for EcoTree. And thank you so much that you explained all these. The holistic approach you have. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And I can say one more time, may the forest be with you. Thank you so much.
Yes, may the forest be with you. Thank you so much, Thomas. Bye-bye. Thank you for listening to my podcast, Magic Brain Kicks. I would like to invite you to share this podcast, to give a comment and a like on iTunes. And if you want more information, please visit my website under drmariahovager.com. Hope I will hear you soon, and kick your brain, and goodbye.